Hi, and welcome to the recorded cooking demo for this month's Book Bites program. This month we read Mother Bruce by Ryan T. Higgins. Mother Bruce is a story of a bear who's an Epicurean gourmet, looks up recipes on the internet, and who, in his most recent recipe, gives a little bit more than he bargained for. So, in honor of the wonderful story that is Mother Bruce, we're going to be cooking Mediterranean meatballs. This is a really simple recipe that has some surprising ingredients in it if you especially are not familiar with Mediterranean cooking. But you're going to know what every single one of them is because they're very, very common. So let's go ahead and get started with our cooking. To make the Mediterranean meatballs, you're going to need a few tools. You're going to need a small collection of bowls. 4, maybe 5 should do you. You're going to need a couple of baking trays and either parchment paper, parchment paper, or a Silpat baking surface. I happen to have 2 baking trays and 2 Silpats. You're also going to need 1 large mixing bowl and 1 medium-sized mixing bowl, a couple of measuring spoons, so in my case, a teaspoon and a tablespoon. If you're following the original recipe, you're going to need a grater, but I'm just going to use a tablespoon instead of the grater because I don't want whole pieces of onion in my meatballs. You're also going to need a good sharp knife and a cutting board. That's basically all you're going to need for this recipe. Now, there is one secret tool that you're going to want. I happen to have mine right here and it's full. You're going to want a bowl of water. This is not an ingredient. This is a resource that you're going to want to have on hand for when we're actually making the meatballs. There we go. That's all that you're going to need for this recipe. Now for our full ingredient list. You're going to need some ground beef. 2 pounds is what the recipe calls for. You're going to need some fresh parsley. If you don't have fresh parsley, you can use dried parsley. That's okay. You'll just need less of it. You're going to need oregano. I know it's kind of hard to see what that is, but oregano. There we go. Oregano. You're going to need black pepper, salt, dill, onion powder, or a fresh onion. Either way, I'm using the onion powder. Some cinnamon. That's a surprising ingredient. You're going to need some cumin, breadcrumbs or panko. I'm going to use panko. It's basically just Japanese breadcrumbs. Then you're going to need a cucumber, a lemon, some Greek yogurt, about a cup of it. That's going to be for our sauce, so if you don't have quite as much, that's okay. And 2 eggs. We're going to start this whole thing off by making our meatballs, and then we're going to make our sauce to go with it so that we can save some time. Go ahead and set your oven to 400 degrees, and let's get started with the actual cooking. Oh yeah, one last thing you're going to need. You're going to need plenty of garlic. So I'm using this pre-chopped garlic just to save time, but if you want to use fresh garlic, that is totally a-okay. I love fresh garlic. Just remember, if you're using this stuff, you're going to need to use a little bit less than the actual recipe calls for because this is a little bit more concentrated. All right, there we go. We're going to start by adding 2 teaspoons, it's one of these, of salt, oregano, and cumin to a small bowl. We will then add 1 teaspoon of ground black pepper and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon to the same bowl. Once those are in, I'm going to add a full tablespoon of onion powder to the bowl because I'm not going to be using a fresh onion. If you are using a fresh onion, take a cheese grater and simply grate some onion powder, fresh onion, into a secondary bowl, not this same bowl. Let's go ahead and do that. Now that we have all of our spices, or dry spices mixed together, we can take a spoon and stir this up and sniff it and see what we think. You may have noticed that when I was measuring this, I didn't worry about getting everything exact. That's because I'm going to be mixing all of this into my meatballs, and then I'm going to go back through and go like, okay, do I like the way it smells? And so if I don't, then I will start adjusting the smells, adjusting the spices, sorry, a little bit at that point. But I can stir this up and see if I like it or if I don't. And if I don't like it, then I can adjust it now. And I want to do that before I put it into the actual dish. Because once you add it to the rest of your ingredients, there's nothing you can do about fixing it, aside from add more stuff. And if you've already added too much, you've got a problem. I've got a wonderful story about the time that I tried to make a Mexican soup into an Italian soup, which I then realized wasn't such a great idea, and I tried to fix it and make it Chinese. And I'll tell you, the spices for Mexican, Italian, Chinese, they just didn't work. So don't do that. Test everything. Make sure you like the way it smells before you put it in to cook. The next thing we're going to do is crack our eggs. So I have here 2 eggs and they're already sitting in the bowl. Now I'm going to crack these eggs into this bowl so that if there's a problem, I can fish the eggshells out without them having gone directly into my meatballs and having somebody break a tooth. So I'm going to crack the eggs on this bowl here so that I can fish out any eggshells that I have to. When you're cracking eggshells, the best thing to do is actually crack them on a plate or something on the side, so that when you don't get teeny tiny eggshells into your bowl that you're actually going to be putting things in. So I'm actually going to use this bowl right here. I'm just going to crack it a little bit and maybe tap it twice and then bring over here and open it up into this here bowl. And then there's no eggshells, so I'm good. I can just drop that directly into my dish when I'm ready to have this go in. I'm going to do the same thing with this egg. Tap it. Oh my goodness! And that's one of the reasons we do that not on the counter. Is sometimes you get things that do something slightly unexpected. All right, so we look good. Now, the next thing we're going to do is chop our parsley. Now, parsley is a leafy herb, and the stems are edible, so you don't really have to worry about that. But you don't really want these really super thick stems. Those aren't so good. So what you're going to do is, if the stems are really thin and flexible, you don't have to worry about that. You can just chop that straight up and put it in. Or you can, break them off if you want to and chop it. I recommend using a knife called a chef's knife, and I'll show you how to hold that. But at this point, we're going to do our parsley. But because we are cutting some things on the cutting board, and we'll have the knife out also, you might want to also do your cucumber and your lemon at this time. You don't have to, though. You can wait to do those later. But you could choose to do those at this time. If you are going to do them, simply peel your cucumber and chop it into very fine pieces, and then cut your lemon in half and juice your lemon, which I will cover later in the video. So I'm going to start, though, myself just by cutting the parsley and just showing you how to just do a quick chop. You want to get it fairly fine, but it doesn't have to be super fine. So here we go. To chop your parsley, make sure you've washed it well, and then you can actually just simply start at this end and chop down. Now, the right way to hold your knife is you want the knife that's called a chef's knife, which has a slight curve to the blade and to the back. And then to hold it, you're simply going to wrap your last 3 fingers around the blade. Your pointer finger is going to go down the side of the blade, and your thumb is going to sit here on the handle in order to give you great purchase. And then I didn't even bother taking mine out of the wrapper that it came in. I'm just going to chop down the parsley and then turn it a little bit and chop my way back through it. As I said, the stems of this are perfectly edible. Now I want a total of a 1/2 cup. And again, this is one of those things that, if you like parsley, use a little more. If you don't like parsley, use a little bit less. But parsley is pretty inoffensive as far as vegetables go, as far as spices go. And so I'm just going to use plenty of it. I've got dogs in the background doing something. All right, there we go. And that is fine. So my parsley is done, and that is going to be plenty of parsley. I'm just going to take this and throw it back into the bowl that I had the parsley sitting in. The last thing we have to do before we can actually start assembling our meatballs is we have to do our garlic. Now, you can cut your garlic with this exact same knife as I did before. Now, again, the finger goes down the side, thumb goes here, and the rest of the fingers wrap around. So you can use this and actually press down on garlic, and that will allow you to actually just break it open and chop it much more easily. And you can crush it and really crush it to after you've gotten the paper off, so you don't have to chop it quite so much, and just go back in and really finely mince it. And a mince is this action like this, and you just cut it really, 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 really small. Don't recommend doing it on a wooden cutting board, and definitely do it after you've done anything else that you're going to be cutting on that cutting board, because anything you do on that will taste like garlic afterward. But it's much easier to actually use a pre-done garlic. Now, this is actually chopped garlic that has been dried and then rehydrated. So a lot of what you're paying for in this is water. So if you just buy diced, your minced dried garlic, you're actually getting the same stuff. Just throw it in some water and let it sit for a few minutes. Now, the recipe calls for 6 cloves of garlic. So I'm actually going to do about a full tablespoon of garlic, because that'll probably be about the same strength, because this is stronger than normal garlic. And so I'm going to use about a tablespoon. And if I don't like the way it smells, I'll add a little bit more. But I'm going to throw in a tablespoon of garlic into this, and then we're going to start assembling our actual meatballs. Forgot, there's one final thing that you need for your meatballs. You need some breadcrumbs. Now, I use something called panko, and if it's backward, I apologize. But any kind of breadcrumbs will work. You do want them to be in fairly small pieces, and keep the box on hand because you might need more. But the recipe calls for 1/2 cup of breadcrumbs. Now, you can put in a little bit less and then add more if your meatballs seem to be not quite sticky enough. It may depend on exactly how much fat is in your meat that you're using, but about a 1/2 cup of breadcrumbs is a great starting point. So we're just going to go ahead now and assemble all of our ingredients. If you haven't already, make sure that your meat is defrosted. Then we're just going to take 2 pounds of beef and simply dump it into our big mixing bowl. So that's 2 containers of meat right there, like that. Go ahead and get rid of the trays. At this point, if you haven't, make sure you wash your hands well, and that you don't need to do anything with your hands for a little while, because we're going to be getting our hands really messy in here with the meat. Now, we're going to take all of our ingredients, every single one of them, and we're just going to add them into the meat, and then we're going to mix with our bare hands. That's why you want your hands to be clean, and make sure you don't want to do anything, because we're going to be getting really gunky here. So I'm going to start actually with the parsley. I'm just going to dump that in, and then I'm going to dump in the eggs. And then I'm going to dump in the breadcrumbs. I'm going to take the garlic, throw the garlic in. And my hands are going to smell like garlic, and that's going to be okay by me. And then I'm going to take my dry spices and just toss them in as well. Now, this whole mixture smells wonderful, and I'm just going to simply dive in with my hands and literally just start mixing it all up. If you're one of those people who has a problem with this idea, you know, it's totally okay to put all of this into a stand mixer and do it that way. That is 100% all right. Now, you can see that my meat here is really holding together quite well. And I might just mix it together a little bit more to make sure the spices are blended. But this is actually kind of what I'm going for. So it's sticking together. It's not just tearing right apart. That means that my breadcrumbs and my eggs are adhering to each other. That's going to make this really easy to form into meatballs. All right, now that we have our meat fully mixed and our baking tray is ready to go, we are ready to start putting these actually out as meatballs. Now, there's a couple ways to do this. You can do this just by hand by like grabbing a bit of the mix and rolling it into a ball. You can also use something about the size of an ice cream scoop. That works well. Or you can use a tablespoon, just a regular large spoon, and that will work as well. If you want to get your meatballs nice and round, though, you can simply do that by making sure that your fingers are wet. That will allow you to smooth the meatballs into a really, really nice round shape. But you don't have to if you don't really care about that. That's totally optional. So let's go ahead and get a few of these ready to go and pop them in the oven. Make sure your oven is set to 400 degrees if you haven't already done so. Well, as soon as we get these meatballs done, we're going to start in on our sauce. That'll take us a few minutes, and then about the time the meatballs come out, the sauce should be done. Meatballs take about 20 minutes to cook. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how to make the meatballs themselves. Now, what I'm about to show you is the exact same trick that ice cream parlors use. They have a wet ice cream scoop, and they use that to scoop up their ice cream. Okay, that's how they do it. If you ever watch them, and then we take that, and boom, there's your meatball. Now, I happen to like these meatballs a little bit smaller than this, so I'm actually not going to use the ice cream scoop. I'm just going to tear that in half, and then in order to make this into a nice neat ball, I'm just going to get my hand wet a little bit, and boom, there we go. Now, I'm just going to keep on doing that until I have as many meatballs as I would like. This recipe should make about 30 meatballs if you make them pretty small. If you make them a little bit bigger, you're going to have fewer. Larger meatballs will take a little bit longer to cook, so just be aware of that. Now, this mix is just perfect as far as I'm concerned because it is not sticking to my hands at all as I'm going down through here. I'm going to tear off a little bit of that one, make them all a little bit smaller. So this is just gorgeous. There we go. And I'm just going to keep on going until I've used up all of my mix. All right, now that the meatballs are all done, go ahead and throw them in the oven for about 20 minutes. Halfway through the cooking, you're going to want to turn the pans 50% of the way around. So just go ahead and put them in, set a timer for 10 minutes so you don't forget. And when that timer goes off, like I said, just rotate the pan. If you have the pans on 2 different levels, you can even trade them over and rotate them because you want to get them evenly cooked. Then we're going to get started on the sauce. All right, the sauce that we're going to make is called tzatziki. And tzatziki is a sauce that is found in the Middle East, as well as in Greece, and it's in some of the surrounding countries. It's a really, really simple sauce. It's simply made with Greek yogurt, some dill, and lemon and zucchini, not zucchini, cucumber. Those are the base ingredients. And then other versions will have, then they'll have some salt and pepper and sometimes some garlic. So we're going to just simply mix those ingredients together to make our sauce. It's pretty simple. So I'm just going to take my vegetables out of my bowl here, and I'm going to pour my Greek yogurt just straight into this medium-sized mixing bowl. And you can use a spoon to get this out, or you can be aggressive like I am, whichever way works better for you. And you just want to get as much of that yogurt out of the container and into the mixing bowl as possible. You want a cup of yogurt. So this is something, if you have a larger container of yogurt, that works just fine. There we go. I got mine in, and we're done with that. Next, we're going to want to throw in our garlic. Now, again, this is one of those things you can put in as much garlic or as little garlic as you want. The recipe calls for between 1 and 2 cloves, so you could just put in a teaspoon or less of garlic, and that'll be fine. I'm just going to take, a small amount and throw it in. I'm now done with my garlic, so I should put that away. There we go. We're also going to need about a tablespoon of dried dill. You can also use fresh dill. Fresh dill will work really well in this. But you can use dried dill and just give it plenty of time to sit in the yogurt, and it'll absorb liquid from the yogurt with no problem whatsoever. So we're going to throw in a tablespoon of dill, and then we're going to throw in half a teaspoon of salt and a quarter teaspoon of black pepper. So, when things call for a quarter teaspoon of black pepper, this is a sauce. So you can actually taste this as you're going. So I'm just going to, crack in a little bit of black pepper and call that good for now. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my salt. And when you're adding salt, you want to add it from a height so that it blends in evenly and distributes well. Now that I've got that in here, I'm actually going to just stir this up and see if I want to. I could taste it right now, or I can add a couple more ingredients. But I'm just going to blend this up really quickly and let the garlic and the salt and the pepper start to meld into the sauce and the yogurt as it is. Now I'm going to be adding a little bit more liquid here in a moment, and when I do, that's going to make things more well, that's interesting. It's going to make things a little bit more liquidy in here. So that's not supposed to be in there. So there we go. So I'm going to add a tablespoon of my dill. So again, we're just going to use that same tablespoon that we used earlier. And this is one of those things that, this is an eyeball sort of thing. So I'm just going to throw my dill in. That's good. Now, I don't need this measuring spoon anymore, so I can just throw this in the sink. But I want to make sure I get as much of this dill out of here as I can, because dill is awesome. Gives things a very fresh taste, especially if you're using fresh dill. And we can just go ahead and pitch that. So again, just going to stir this in. And should be smelling pretty darn good. And then we're going to do our last 2 pieces of this. We're going to do our cucumber and our lemon. Similar to the eggs, before you add your lemon to your dish, well, you want to wash it, which is not similar to the eggs, but you're going to want to juice your lemon into a bowl. Now, the reason you want to do this is because lemons have these wonderful things called seeds. You can see the seeds in there. And we don't want the seeds in our sauce. We want our seeds not in the sauce. So we're going to take our lemon and we're going to just juice it into the bowl here. And this way we don't have to worry about the seeds. We'll just fish them out with a spoon after the fact. I'm just simply squeezing the lemon, which I've always found to work perfectly well for me. And then I just kind of roll it back and forth in my hand to get more of the juice out. You can also use an actual juicer if you happen to have one, which I don't. But if you do, you can use a juicer. If you don't happen to have fresh lemons, that's okay. You can use lemon bottled fresh lemon juice. It works just fine. So, but as you can see here, when I move my lemon, I have plenty of seeds in here, and I'm not going to want any of those. So I'm going to, now this lemon has a lot of liquid. This is probably enough. I'm not going to need the other half of this lemon. So I'm just going to go in here and I'm just going to fish out those lemon seeds and throw them over here in a second bowl that I happen to have sitting here from earlier. And then once I'm done, I'm just going to pour this in to the rest of my sauce and stir it in just like I was doing before. This is not the most efficient spoon to be doing this with. I really should probably be using a larger one. Another thing you can do is do this over something like a tea strainer. That'll catch any pieces for you. It is a really good technique that you can use for this. Let's see, pull that out. Get this big piece. And there we go. The rest of that is probably okay. At least for demonstration purposes. Again, I'm just going to take that and pour it into my sauce, my tzatziki, and just stir it up. And again, how much lemon you put in this is really up to personal preference. My daughter would probably love more lemon than I put in this. My wife would probably like a little bit less. My father would have added both halves of the lemon. And my mother would have told me I've already added too much. It smells really good. Finally, I'm going to add cucumber directly to the dish. Now, I want to peel this cucumber first, and I can either peel it into a bowl or peel it directly into the trash, but you do want to peel the cucumber, at least in my opinion. Some people will do tzatziki with cucumber with the peel on, but I've always found that to be a little bit unusual because the texture of the peel just kind of gets in the way a little bit. The original recipe calls for grating the cucumber. I don't really see a good reason to do that. This sauce, is, as it stands, is pretty thin. And if I grate this cucumber down, it's just going to release a lot of water into my tzatziki. And that's going to make the sauce really watery and not stick to those meatballs. So I'm just not going to do that. I'm going to instead chop it up pretty small, but that'll keep a lot of the water contained within the cucumber. And if you don't want your cucumber sliced into your tzatziki, that's okay. You can just like slice up the cucumber. So how do you cut your cucumber? The easiest way to do it and the safest way, because a round thing rolls and something that's moving with a sharp knife is a bad idea. So you can either cut it in half and then go from there, or just cut off one side. Because as soon as I've cut off that side, I can now put the cucumber on that side and it isn't going to move. It's now stable. I'm going to cut off another side Put that over here. Rotate again. Cut off another side. And rotate it one last time. And cut off the last side. I now have a cucumber that's not going to roll on me. And so I can now cut it, and I'm going to turn it into pretty small cubes. So there I now have it already into slices. And then I can stack them back up again and slice them the long way a couple of times. And then turn them sideways and simply go down the cucumber and turn them into little teeny tiny squares. Now, my cutting board is getting pretty full here. So I'm going to just take all of the stuff that's in here, and I'm going to move the cutting board a little bit, pick up my bowl, shift it over here to the edge of the counter, and I'm just going to scrape all this stuff into my bowl. Because a cutting board with stuff on it is a cutting board that is not safe. So because you're trying to avoid things rather than having full range of motion. I'm just going to keep on going. Now, you may have noticed what I'm doing with my fingers. I'm turning them into this like claw shape to hold things, because that way I don't have these fingers that are sticking out that I can then, chop my way through. I want to have a claw because then I can slice down the front of my knuckles and I'm not going to hit my fingers. Keeps me safe, and it keeps the people who are eating my food from getting something that they don't want in their dish. All right, so I can now take these, and again, just going to throw that into my dish, into my bowl here. There it is. And I'm just going to stir this together. And once it's all done, give it a taste, let it sit for a little while, and see what you think of it. If you want to thicken it up, add a little bit more yogurt. If you want to thin it out, add a little bit more of the lemon juice. And there we go. My tzatziki is ready. All right, so there we are. The very last thing you want to do before you get your meatballs out and sit down to dinner is do a little bit of cleanup, because you should have some time to rinse off the bowls and stuff before your meatballs come out. But otherwise, go ahead and enjoy. I hope you loved the Mediterranean meatballs, and also I hope you love the book Mother Bruce by Ryan T. Higgins. See you later.